Okay, we are going to pick up where we left off in the last video, where we're actually going to now separate out the class specification file, which is called the .h or a header file, from the circle class. I've gone ahead and started to do some things here in Visual Studio to get it set up. And so we're going to take a look at what I've started here, but I also want to show you in your textbook, Program 7-12 has already done this. So I want to show you that example quick. Some of you have seen this already, but not everybody has. But in Program 7-12, the first thing I want you to notice is this. It uses a #include rectangle.h. And what that's doing is telling the driver which class header file to use. So that contains the rectangle's class declaration. And so that's how the computer knows that where all of the things are for the rectangle. And then I don't have this as a running program, so we're just looking at the code here. But you can set it up and run it on your own if you like. But basically they create a rectangle box, and here all of the output and all of the working with the box is done in the driver. Now, that rectangle is separated into two separate classes. One is the .h file. That's what it looks like here. And this is a class declaration. And please notice it's basically all your prototypes and your private instance fields. So for a rectangle, that was length and width, and then there were some setters and getters, including a get area. Also notice the semicolon at the very end here. Okay. These lines of code here at the beginning, this #IFNDEF stands for if not defined. So it's #if and def, which stands for if it's not defined, rectangle _h, then define it is what it's saying. Then you're done, end if. So this #end if is closing off this if not defined. So basically, if it's already defined, it just skips all of this and goes to the end if and it's done. So then it doesn't repeat code behind the scenes. The .cpp for rectangle is completely different, and this is what I'm going to show you how to write. It's completely different, meaning the following. You don't have a driver, you don't have any main, you don't have any instance fields locally defined here because they're locally defined in the header file, and you tell it to use the header file by saying #include rectangle.h. Every method is then written as kind of like its standalone little task. And you need to tell every method what class it belongs to by using code that looks like this. Notice that's the name of the class followed by 2 colons followed by the name of the method. And that's true for every method. If you look, set length, set width, get length, get area, etc. So we are going to be doing that with the circle class. I've already started the circle.h file right here. And you'll notice that I have missing the #if and def. So if I were to put that in, it would look like this. #if not defined. And then I have to use the name of the class in all capitals. So my name of my class is circle. So it would be circle _h. If it's not defined, then I want to define it, and I define it using all the code. And it looks like it put in it #end if for me. I'm going to cut that and place it down below. So that's what it would look like. I would have my #if not defined. Now, here's the deal though. This is the standard way to set up and make sure that that code isn't duplicated. You saw it here with the rectangle class, okay? But there's a shortcut, and the shortcut is what Visual Studio put in for us, and that was to use pragma once. So you can either write it like this, where you use the #if and def, and then #define, and then #end if, or you can just use pragma once. So if I go back, delete that out, I can use pragma once. That does the same thing as these 3 lines of code. If and def, pound define, and pound and if. Now I'm going to delete that out of here because I was just using it to look at. Now, the other thing that we want to take a look at here is I have my private instance fields, and I have this, my update diameter method that we had written earlier in the videos. I have my constructors and my deconstructors, and then I have my setters and my getters. And what's going to happen is basically when we go to write the other class's code, and also notice that the header file here has the semicolon at the end of it. One way that I write my code, and if you also look at this, this pretty much follows what we would consider a class diagram. So if I'm writing this from scratch, what I typically do is I take this code and I copy this, Control C, and I go to my circle.cpp file. And then in my circle.cpp file, I'm going to pretend like I'm creating this from scratch so you can see how this might work. I'm going to paste it. And then the first thing, I don't need my instance fields because those are accessible to me. I am going to need to create my update diameter method. I don't need the keyword class right here because that's in the other file. I do need to tell it what header file I'm using, so I have to do pound include in quotes rectangle, no, circle.h, okay, because I'm doing my circle. And then I have update diameter and all the private and public. I've actually never tried this where I have a private method, so this will be a learning for me. And then we have all of these other methods. Now it's yelling at us because if I hover over this, it says function is not defined for, it's not found. And what that means is if we take a look at how rectangle was written and we look at just the beginning line, the header of one of those functions, remember we have to tell it what class we're working with. So every single one of our methods is going to need not rectangle : but circle : So if I click here and I type circle : that should clean up what it doesn't understand. And we have to do that on our constructors as well. As we start to go through, you're going to see that it still doesn't like this, and that's because we have to actually write our function here. We can't end with a semicolon here. We need to go ahead and we will have to define our constructor. We'll have to get rid of every single one of these semicolons, and so that's a common mistake. And then as I go through, and including on my deconstructor, as we continue. So I'm going to clean up some of this and then we'll come back and look at what it is going to end up being. So give me a minute. Okay, I've been making some edits just to speed this up a little bit. So I updated the update diameter method, which remember was just 2 times the radius. We have our constructors, and what I've been doing is just kind of copying the code from the other constructors. So I'm going to copy this code, Control C, paste it into this curly brace, Control V, take out the comments, etc., get things to line up. And I believe there is a shortcut for getting things to be lined up. And it should be, if I select all and I control, let's see if this will work, Control F. Nope. So Control K, Control D. There we go. Control K, Control D. It's a weird combination, but Control K, or it might be select all, Control K, Control F. I don't know if you have to select all or not. Let me just try to mess up some of the spacing here and see if I can do a Control K and then a Control F. Didn't like that. Control K, Control F. Nope. So if I select all and we try Control K, Control F, that will reformat. Don't know why you have to select all. It's a weird combination, but that's what you got to do. And so we're getting closer here. If we've got here, this is my parameterized constructor. I pasted it into the deconstructor, so that's not going to do me any good. So let's try that again. We're going to exit, Control X from there, and paste it there. And then I have my deconstructor. I did have an error earlier on the deconstructor because I had left the tilde in front here. And you have to make sure that the tilde stays with the deconstructor name of that method. And so it has to be on the second part there. And then we've got the set radius. Now, and I just wanted to leave a few of these so you could kind of see. Now, a lot of times I don't have all of the comments in here, but what you need to do, make sure you do this. If you're copying and pasting over from that header, is you have to delete that semicolon. I hit enter, beginning curly brace, ending curly brace, and on this one I'm going to be bringing in a parameter radius, and we are going to set the instance variable underscore radius is going to get assigned radius. And so getters, I went ahead and wrote the getters, and the find area, I'm just going to return that as return. And it's going to be pi r squared, so it's going to be pi times pow, and then we have to have the radius squared. There is a built-in constant pi. I'm not sure if that's it. We will see when we get done here if it throws an error. And we're getting close to being done. We do have a couple errors. We'll see what this one is saying. And it says member may not be redeclared outside the class, so that means I probably have another set radius somewhere, and it might be that I have I didn't like delete it from down here, so I had copied over the other class just to kind of use it as copying and pasting. I'm going to go ahead and delete that so we can start to get things all cleaned up and see if we can get this code to execute. It still does not like set radius, and that might be, maybe there's something in the header file that's not quite set up. Set radius, double. It's a void. And let's take a look. Pound include circle.h. We are probably going to have to pound include the math library here. And CMath, and it's usually, you usually put those first and then you put the user defined header second. So we'll do pound include CMath, pound include circle.h, and see if we can't get this cleaned up a little bit. Still does not like set radius. It's probably something from up here. I'm probably up. We got an extra curly brace there is what it is. And then hopefully that'll clean up the rest of it. Does not recognize PI. I don't remember what it is, so I'm just going to do 3.14 right here for my pi. And it doesn't recognize radius because I have to use underscore radius. Now, what I have done is we have all the prototypes are in my header file, and including my constructors, deconstructors, my setters, my getters, etc. And this file is the one that has a semicolon at the end. And then my implementation is in the .cpp file, and the implementation is the actual code. So all of the guts of my programming is here. So that's where we've actually defined, we've written the code for a default constructor. We've written the code for the parameterized constructor, etc. And if I do a select all, Control K, Control D, that reformats everything. And so this should be it. It should run. If I go to my driver now, I've got the CMath here. I honestly don't think that I need it there. I'm going to comment it out. Circle.h, and if I run it, it should run like it did before. There's probably always going to be a mistake or some error that's going on, so let's just see what we come up with. See if it actually executes. It looks like we have a successful execution. Our diameter is not printing correctly, however, so I'm going to have to take a look and see. Okay, I opened up the wrong output. Let me run that again, or let's take out the output. The output here is wrong because our diameter should be 7. This is a great example of stale data. So that means that I did not update my diameter somewhere. So I'm going to go back into my code, take a look at what I did, and just kind of glance through. I have the update diameter method written. That's okay. I updated it in my default constructor. I updated it in my parameterized constructor, it looks like. Don't need to do anything in the deconstructor, but when I reset my radius right here, I did not update the diameter. So let's see if that fixes it or not. So we'll stop execution and spell update diameter correctly and see if we can get correct data. And here's that execution. So now we have the correct data. So that was actually a good example of stale data there. And so a little bit longer video, but that shows you guys how to take your class, separate it out into your header file, which should include only your instance fields and your prototypes for your methods. And you put your definition for your methods in your .cpp file. You do need to pound include the correct header file on the top of your .cpp, and then in your driver you also need to pound include the correct header file on top of the with your pound include directives. Okay, so that wraps up this video, and you guys should be practicing on creating your classes now using these 3 separate files.